Hey guys, what's going on? It's Fitzy from Fishing with Fitzy. Today I'm going to be showing you how to tie a hotspot pheasant tail nymph, as you can see on my vise here. Real simple nymph to tie, but super effective. Mid to late summer in Australia. I've had nothing but success on these in both orange, which we'll be tying today, and also green. So let's get right into it. We're starting off with a size 12 traditional nymph hook. Any sort of nymph hook between 10 and 16 will work well. I'm just using 12 because it's in the middle. I'm also using a tungsten bead, or nickel bead I think it's called. So these are pretty easy to get. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put our hook in the vise, and then with our bobbin and our orange thread, we're just going to start at the top, just behind the bead, and then go back to lock our thread in. We're going to chop that off, and then continue down the shank of the hook to where the bend starts in the hook. Awesome. So we're just going to tie our tail in now, just using pheasant tail fibres. You just want to grab a decent little bunch of them, try and find some nice ones. So once you've got your cluster of pheasant tail fibres aligned, you want to figure out the placement. You want about a hook shank length hanging off the back. I'm just going to do a loose wrap just to sort of cinch it down and then get them staying on the top. Do a couple tighter wraps until they're all locked into place and you're happy where they are. So about there's pretty good. I'm going to continue down the hook shank to where we left off with our thread. And then we're going to do one wrap underneath. If I can get this right. This is not really playing ball for me. One wrap under the fibres, just to keep them sitting nice and upright, and then a couple more over the end. So then you should have a nice sort of fanned out pheasant tail, and then we want to trim this down just behind the bead and then work our way up to the front where we're going to tie this down, and this will create our body. You want to try and keep it nice and even. The more even you keep it now, the better off it'll be later on. Alright, cool, so we've got our body sorted. Now we're going to tie in our wire. I'm just using some medium-sized ultra wire and copper. It doesn't really matter what you use, but copper is generally best. So cut off a small section of that. And now we want to straighten it out, put it up, just up under the bead, and tie that in with a couple loose wraps, and then gradually getting tighter as we work our way down the base of the hook shank there. And then we'll just leave that there for now because we'll come back to that. So now we want to go back up the hook shank, a couple loose wraps, and we're going to pick a few more pheasant tail fibres. This time we want to use the longer ones that are at the top of the feather. So 4 or 5 works pretty good for this. So once you got those off, you want to make sure they're aligned. And now we're just going to trim off the tips there, just so it keeps them nice and neat at the top. And pinch those. Now we're going to wrap these in at the top. We're going to tie them in. I find sometimes it's easier to come back from the bead a little bit for your first tie-in point. That way the fibres don't go too AWOL. It doesn't need to be super neat because it's kind of a messy looking bug anyway. So once we got those, we want to go all the way down the hook shank just before where we ended off with the wire. So we've got that there, and then a couple loose wraps up to the top. Now with these, you want to go in whichever direction you feel comfortable in, but you want to wrap them around the hook to create the body of the fly. And it'll get thicker as it gets to the top naturally because that's the way these fibres are. Cool. It's up at the top there, so now we're going to do a couple X wraps across the fibre to lock it into place. Just a couple across the top. Now you can trim this waist off and then do a couple more wraps to tuck that in behind the head of the bead. Cool. Now that's done, we're going to do the same with our wire. Wrap it in the opposite direction, up the hook shank, trying to keep it as even as possible. And then when we get to about the 3/4 mark, we're going to go ahead and tie that in with a couple wraps across, like so. And then we're going to helicopter our wire and helicopter that off, like so. Cool, so that's pretty much the base of the nymph. Now for our dubbing, I prefer to use a combination of hare's mask and this grey ice dubbing blend. So I've sort of created that one here that I've got left over from a few other nymphs. You don't need much of this, and you want to try and keep it loose, hence using the hare's mask. So use a little bit of dubbing wax, not too much, just enough. I'm using the Wapsi dubbing wax, just a tiny bit, just to get it onto the hook. There's plenty of ways to do this. I'm probably not doing it the correct way, but everyone has their own sort of method. So we want to make a thin, sort of tapered-ish noodle, but don't dub it on too thick. So too tightly, I mean. So just going to do a few wraps over the spot, the second to last little bit of wire there, and that's probably about enough. Tear that off, hold it down, and now this is where we create our hot spot. So you can go around as many times as you like until you get the size hot spot that you're after. I tend to go about half the size of the bead. So once we've got that, just pull those fibres back, make sure it's looking nice. And cool, and that's pretty much it. Then you just whip finish your fly, add a tiny bit of head cement or super glue, and you're good to go. And tiny bit of head cement. These flies are great for small streams, and you know, the fish are quite hungry at this time of the year. I've caught, I'm going to say 70% of the fish that I've landed I've caught on this nymph in a variation of colours and patterns. So let me know what you think of this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Maybe suggest some other flies that you want to see me tie in the comments section. I'm pretty new to fly fishing and fly tying, but I'm definitely getting the hang of it real quick. So see you guys on the water. Yoo!